Welcome to Really Wellness. I'm here today with Farhana Sarguro, who's the founder of Relatable Content, a space for like-minded women to collaborate and connect. And today we're going to talk all about the impact of communities, and particularly for communities for women, on our well-being. So Farhana, I don't know if you want to start by giving us a little bit of insight into Relatable Content and a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Farhana Sarguro, and like Annabelle said, I'm the founder of Relatable Content. But Relatable Content actually started as a podcast. So, for a lot of people who had started following me from the beginning, knew that I just wanted to create a conversation around the topics that I was experiencing. And as I started doing that, I realized that I needed a space and a community and people to support me in this experience that I was going through. And as I started discovering more podcasts, I realized that I was building a following of people on Instagram, and sooner or later became an Instagram page. And I built a Facebook group, and then the group grew, and then we just became a community of people. And that is when I realized that a community is actually perfectly explains how I was able to grow and be who I wanted to be, was with the support of these like-minded people. And you said women, but relatable content is also different genders, like men, transgendered, women, of course. It's just that the community itself is just a little space haven, even a word, a little safe space for women to really be raw and open with each other.
Is that kind of sense of growing community that you experienced from the beginning what inspired you to found relatable content and to evolve it to the place that it is today, or are there other elements that kind of really started you on this journey?
Hmm. Well, I think it's very important to note that I come from a large family, and being a child of four, being cousins of fours and sixes, there was a huge sense of people and gathering and support, and that allowed me to see that that is what life is. You are together with these people, and they shape you, and you can't be who you are without a tribe, honestly. And it doesn't take just your mother to bring you up. It takes a group of people, a tribe. Like, that how that saying goes. It takes a tribe to bring you up. That was something that I had been through, and when I moved overseas, I constantly searched for people that were like-minded to me. And when I found that, I was constantly being shown that I am not one by myself, I am one with others. And if we can keep doing that and celebrating those things, why not do it myself and do it with exactly all the things that I like to do? So I could see that being part of a community or creating a community came from the past, but I also could see that we spend a lot of time online. And is it worth spending time online that is not going to impact us in a good way? Or is it more important to create that sense of community in a well-being space where we can feel fresh and nourished just from spending time online? So, yeah.
That really resonates with me. I think, community is such a big part of life offline, certainly. Your community of people are kind of what pull you and support you through life, and inspire you along the way. But I think also online, something which you are a part of and I've seen developing more recently, are these very kind of healthy, very well-being focused spaces, more and more for women. And I think previously we've also always associated kind of the online world with this very kind of negative sense of community and trolling and shaming content, and things that are very negative. But more and more I'm starting to see people like you come together, and create these really safe spaces and really happy and positive spaces for people to connect with each other and collaborate and create really, really beautiful things. And I think what you're doing is essentially changing changing the face of kind of online communities in a way, which is really, really cool. And I know that relatable content, you know, as you've said, is a space for kind of everyone. But you do kind of have a relatively female focus, if that makes sense. And I wanted to ask you why you think it's important to build community spaces that support women in this way, and also specifically for women to connect and collaborate.
Very good question. And that's actually a question that I was asking myself from the beginning. And it's always playing in my head because I can take this question back to my past again, which everything I believe comes from experience, and why the title Relatable Content was chosen, because I went through things as a woman and I had not been through things as a man, and I couldn't relate to a man because I was never in their body. So I could only put my things and experiences into a perspective from a woman. And growing up, I had a lot of things that were different to men, you know, and every culture does go through the same thing. But in my mixed cultures growing up, there were a lot of things that women were going through and they didn't speak about at all. And as we can tell through history, like her story is just not written, shared in the books. It's all, you know, one prototype. And for me, that was something that I knew I needed to change. I couldn't at the same time block people who had a story to share to not be a part of that equation, you know? So for me, I strongly believe that those experiences as being a woman made me stronger because I was around other women that were going through the same thing. And it was actually a women's circle that I went to when I was about 14 years old, where there were all types of women, women from Spain, England, Germany, and they had a very similar spiritual path. And we had so many conversations, and it was just out of this world for 14-year-old women, to be honest. And we were able to develop these conversations that didn't exist outside of a 14-year-old's typical life. And I really think that enabled me to see that a community for women is important. I mean, we go through things and we see it online, but we can't necessarily speak out about it because we might be ashamed, or we might see other people talking about things that we don't want to speak out about because it might be offensive to someone or our culture or the men in our lives or something else. And so I just couldn't stand that. And I thought, why should I then create a space where people can come into it and still we can feel intimidated, you know? Of course, we should build a space where everyone is welcome and where nobody should feel intimidated. But that is my stepping stone for relatable content, to first develop that community of women that can say or speak their mind or do anything they want. And then from there, we branch out and allow people of different genders or beliefs or whatever to just, you know, come to the table as well. But I need to first see more of my women with our own tables and our own conversations before I can say, okay, we can all come in.
I think, you know, you're right. I think women often are brought up to believe that, or brought up in environments where, or society teaches them that there are things that we just don't talk about to each other, whether it's kind of close friends or family. And I think that isolates us quite a lot. I think it really, really sort of separates from each other. It separates us from each other. And that's why it's so important now that we're evolving and having these spaces where women can connect and see our similarities as much as our differences, because I think we go through a lot of the same things and we want a lot of the same things in life. Whatever background we have, wherever we come from, we all often have similar insecurities and ambitions. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about why you think previously we've lacked those spaces, or been kind of cut off from collaborating with each other. Do you think that this has maybe been led by a sense of competition bred by society amongst ourselves, or are there other reasons that we've been distanced from each other and distanced from collaborating with each other.
To answer your first one, why do I think so many of us are cut off from sharing those spaces, is because of our competition, our competitive state. From the moment we breathe, we're like looking for validation and satisfaction from correcting ourselves in these spaces. And growing up, we're always being put up against one another. I mean, we're reading magazines, we're comparing, we're at school, we're comparing our clothes, our hair, everything. And social media has been the biggest one that I think most people are comparing on. And we're waking up to these realities that we're constantly comparing one another, but we're not waking up to the conversation of how to take that away. How can we actually look at that as an advantage? Okay, we're comparing one another, let's celebrate you, like, you're different, let's talk about your body looks this way, let's not point it out but celebrate it. And I wrote that down one night in my book. I woke up and at 2 o'clock in the morning I was just like, I need to celebrate everyone's differences as a whole. Like, I need to change the way I'm creating space and rather welcome in the fact that you're different, and you're different. And that is why I think we're so competitive, because we're not willing to accept those changes as a good thing. We think that person's going to one up me, that person's going to use this as an opportunity, that's going to get them in a direction that I want to go. But honestly, like, talking to one another right now, the spaces that we've shared and jumped off on conclusions that we've come together, or the decisions that we've made together have actually got us more excited and driven us to do so many other things. Why can't we do that every day? Why can't we do that on the spaces that we share online?
Absolutely. You've reminded me of a quote that I saw the other day. I think it was like one of those fabulous kind of Instagram graphic quotes that you see. And it was something like, I'm sick of comparison. Like, you are wonderful as you, and she is wonderful as her. And I think, so often, and this goes back to kind of the earlier point we were talking about around kind of why online communities have had such a bad name. Previously, I think specifically online, but also offline in the media, you're right, we have all these kind of comparisons that are drawn between each other rather than celebrating each other. And even though it's something that's always been quite alien to me, I've never kind of found myself doing anything but celebrating the women around me. I've never really experienced a sense of kind of jealousy or fear in relation to other women, but I see it in relation to how my friends treat each other, or how women treat each other online, for example. And I think it's hugely damaging, and it keeps us down, and it keeps us from pushing each other forward to do great things, which is exactly what you're doing in your space. But there are these kind of real barriers that exist.
I wanted to add that because we're comparing ourselves in constant of honestly, in my opinion, we're constantly taking away from the opportunities, really, in my perspective, to bounce off of one another, to create from one another, to develop. Honestly, like, this is why women, or why I strongly believe the community did so well from the beginning, is so many of us really want to see each other thrive and do things that we've never seen before, or hear things and be like, oh wow, like, that's actually an opportunity for me, or look at her, she's thriving. If that moment of celebration could come out more in us, then we wouldn't be so jealous or be so comparative the way most people are. And if we could look back at history and say, and I say history just from the time where the Greek ruled the world, and men, really. From that perspective of men ruled and men wrote stories and men did everything, it was all men's stories. Like, if it was written for men and we're living in a society that's for men, if the general public is going to work and they're working for male CEOs, for masculine, masculine, masculine. All these masculine things, our feminine doesn't exist. So we're not feeding the feminine, and nor are we looking after the feminine, you know? And that's why I think, like your question on what about the feminine, because we don't know about it yet, and that power that needs to be like woken up
Yeah,
to, you know, like, okay, now that I see it, we're collaborating, women, let's go.
absolutely. And I think, you know, it's something interesting, and this is something that I learned recently in relation to exercise, but it really illustrates your point around community and the impact that that actually genuinely has on driving each other forward is, you know, when we, for example, exercise as a group, it's scientifically proven that we do better as individuals and as the entire group when we work together. Whereas if we work apart, we're completely demotivated, we don't perform as well. Um, and it's the entire opposite effect. Yet we seem to have this very competitive mentality that suggests that we should be singular and on our own and pushing forward on our own. However, we see this, whether it's in exercise, whether it's in other things in society, when we stand together and we push each other forward together, all these wonderful, wonderful things happen, especially as women. And you've mentioned actually the awakened feminine, and that was something I really wanted to explore with you. So can you take us through what the awakened feminine is, and how that kind of plays a role in your journey and also our journey as women?
Mm. So I think every story comes from each person, right? And every person tells their own story. And for me, my story, I think, became more prevalent and more real when I woke up to the fact that I have this opportunity that I didn't see because I thought it was my problem. You know, I was covering and pushing away and disguising and covering up, and it showed. I was negative, emotional, depressed, in my room. Still, sometimes, not going to say that that's completely changed, but all these things were coming up. And when it was only when I explored healing and what that meant, like what are the reasons to all these things that I'm doing, what is the common symptom and the common factor that I found myself in. And it wasn't the acceptance, you know, that was the denial, that I was allowing myself, it's not me, that's not what I want, you know. And when I accepted the fact that, okay, this is something that I need to explore and I need to let in and I need to enjoy and discover more of, because this is my power, that to me describes my feminine awakening. Because my power is soft, and it's comes from the genital that I own, really. And other women who own, and I say women who own similar genitals to me, the yoni, as people like to say, when you tap into that and realize, like, okay, that is where we hold that power. And for so long, we've not told ourselves that exists. You know, we've told ourselves that whatever, as we were saying before, competition is important, or jealousy and whatever else comes along with being a woman. But when we wake up to this realization that we own power, and if we can feel that in our body, in our muscles, in our yonis, like I said, I believe that that's an awakening. That's a realization that, holy cow, like, I have the opportunity to create and to hold my space and to walk into a room and feel that energy come off of me. Because for sure, I've been told many times by men that I'm very intimidating, but now I see it as my power, because I have woken up to the fact that that's the feminine awakening. Like, I can walk into space and hold that energy, and that for me is the feminine awakening. And I think people can describe it as differently because they go through different experiences, but that was mine. And well, I don't think that would have woken up to my calling if it were not for other women who were in similar experiences, as in have tapped into their questions of discomfort. You know, these women who have all accepted, shall I say, that there's something that they're holding within, or that they're not happy with who they are, or they're not accepting society, or they're not accepting what well-being says women should be, you know, or how they should look, or how we should behave, or how we should talk if we're looking after ourselves, or how our skin should look if we're eating well, or all these small things that women were feeling or questioning. If we didn't do that, then I think we would all be waking up to these red flags, I should say, that perhaps there's something else that we're missing here, and that is our awakening. That is what we're distracted by, and I think a lot of people are still distracted by it, you know, like we're constantly spending time online, distracted by comparing ourselves, doing things that are not our calling. You created 3D wellness. Tell me that this is not your calling. Like, you're in love with it. We're here right now both because we're like, yes, we have a power.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, you know, those kind of constructs that we're taught around comparison and competition as women really take us away from that real power that lies within, like, the feminine within. And that's not just for women, you know, everyone has the feminine and the masculine within them. But I think there's a lot of shame around embracing that feminine for all genders. And I think women in particular, you know, we're taught that we don't touch these things, we don't talk about these things. And actually, once you are willing to embrace, like, the power that your body and your female energy holds, it's so empowering and it's so awakening. You know, as women, as, like, the feminine part of ourselves, we can do incredible things. We are essentially life givers, which is huge, and that's not for every woman as well, I might add, and it's okay if it's not. But what I'm saying is that that power, that sense of female power that lies within us, is accessible to us all, and hugely, I think, impactful, on you know, helping us to live happier, more creative, more kind of productive lives.
Can I just say that I was thinking about this too, because when I created the last event on relatable content, I kept thinking, is it a space for everyone to come to? And the answer was no, because I'm not comfortable to talk about my boobs around a man, or I'm not comfortable to say, like, most women are not comfortable saying, okay, rub your boob. Like, as soon as I said it, you're like, oh, like, what am I supposed to do? And now you're welcoming other people who have never been in that kind of situation. No, I couldn't allow myself to say, okay, we're all the same or we're all equal. That's actually stripping women's rights again from the opportunity to be a woman. Like, can you not see that these moments of celebrating our pure softness and our pure beauty in our bodies and what we've been given is not allowed yet again? And that for me is something that I'm trying to figure out. How can I create these spaces for us to celebrate our feminine, our soft sides, when we need to be more inclusive? You know, it's so hard that I need to focus on people who want to be me as a gender and just being my gender itself. I'm already at a war with my own gender.
I think it's very complicated, but I think, you know, we can be equal but different.
Mm.
And I think our differences are the things that, like, are worth celebrating as much as our equality. And I think, you know, going back to what we were speaking about before in relation to women kind of having barriers to spaces where they feel safe with one another, or where they feel safe to kind of embrace their femininity and the feminine, you first kind of need to create spaces that are for women and people who identify as women, and then you can evolve that to a more inclusive space, so that, but first we need to create a sense of safety and security and comfort for women in order that they feel comfortable, if that is to evolve further, I
Yeah,
think.
and do you see that? Like, I'm not a part of many platforms like that, and that's why I realized, like, there's a gap in the market. There's no platform for women to be a part of. We always have to fit a specific look or a specific niche. We need to be fit, or we need to be, like, how. we're discriminating upon someone's images or social media handles or followers or email address. I don't know what it is. We're all judging constantly, and I don't see a lot of communities
Yeah,
that allow all women.
I think there are communities for specific needs or specific spaces. So, for example, I follow quite a few people online that are very female focused communities, but only for very specific things. So, for example, I follow a woman called Grace Hazel who deals specifically with sexual awakening for women. But as wonderful as her work is, and I'm obsessed with it, she doesn't deal with any other female space, if that makes sense. Or there are things like the Goddess Circle, but I think what's very different about your platform is it celebrates, everything that women are doing in all spaces for women, and it brings them together in one place, essentially, where you can find all that information, which is very, very unusual. And I wanted to ask you, kind of over time, as this community space has evolved, have you seen kind of more of an impact on your own sense of well-being and happiness in terms of being awake as a woman, as well as kind of benefits for others within your community?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I don't think one person can feel like they're going backwards when they're moving, if we're moving, that means change is happening and we're feeling like there's a small step towards accomplishing something. And for me, that was always a space for women to thrive in, and for women to be in. And we need to be in our own league. Like, I'm following pages too that's like, women are in their own league. And I'm like, yes, we are. And I have created that for women, and I feel that. And I keep saying to anyone who joins the space, please use it as your own. Like, connect to people who you need to connect to, do your own thing, collaborate with whoever, DM, like, whatever you want to do. But the only way we're going to allow that kind of space for one another is if we let our ego go and we break down whatever preconception or pre-notion we have of others are, And to answer your question of, do I see that is beneficial as change, right? Like, do I see
Yeah.
that? Yes, again, like, I've met so many people. I've met you. I've met so many women that are all over the world who say the same message. They say, or they always send upon their first messages, wow, I've just always wanted to be in a space with no competition when it comes to women, a collaborative space. And that, I think, has become relatable content, a collaborative space for all. And yeah, I would recommend anyone to want to take that message into their own lives, even if it's just with your siblings or your partners or whoever. Because I was always told, why do you have to see the world in such a in a way that is non-existent? I always think that things can happen, it's possible. I'm hopeful of so many things to not be that way, because I'm such a realist that I say, well, if I want this, it's going to happen. And it was something that I always felt negative for. People would say, like, it's not really going to be like that. The world isn't the way you think it's going to be. But if I can believe that and I can manifest that, then I know that that can exist, So if I'm creating that online, then other people need to do it too, so we can share the world together.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it takes, when we get rid of that ego and we, put forward our ideas and we create these spaces in these communities where we're celebrating each other, it removes, a huge long-term psychological stress that comes with being a woman and continuously, experiencing that competitiveness and that comparison, massively so. And I wanted to know if that was something that you've experienced in your own life.
Hmm. I think perhaps it has happened and it's helped shape who I am, but I can't think of one precise example that will allow me to say that allowed me to be who I am. I think I've wanted this for so long because I'm so sick of being judged or in my own head about these things. You know, I feel it. You can tell no woman that they're being judged. And they feel wrong because we know it. We can feel when there's another woman in our space and they're like, this is my God, don't come into my space, you know? We have this intuition and this energy that we exchange, no matter who we are, men or female, male, female, sorry, uh, not gender specific. We can feel when someone is transmitting some sort of negative energy or positive energy. And I have wanted that to not exist. So I want to be in a space where I can allow my ego to drop. And when I say something to someone, they put their guard up for me to be like, you know what, your ego is up, but I come in peace. You know, I'm standing, and I want that to exist for us. So I need to be that. You know, I think that's the only way I can create space for myself. And I went to an all-girls school, and I competed in a lot of all-girls things. And I think I hated an all-girls school because it was always, you know, we were competing against one another, and we were trying to be one another. And yeah, to answer your question, I don't think that this comes from an experience, but rather I want to create that for us or for myself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I went to an all-girls school too, and I very, very much understand that sentiment. I think it's an environment that very much pits you against each other as women, and takes you away from kind of creating a sense of community and collaboration, even though it claims to do the opposite. And I didn't have a particularly bad experience at school, but if I compare the relationships I had with women then to the relationships I have with women now, it's a completely different level and desire for intimacy, and appreciation of each other as well as kind of awakened women, if that makes sense.
I think if we had the opportunities that we have now to see what women can do and bring to each other's tables, then high school would be so different. I think that's why I really enjoy women um, and male. There's this group of men in New York that do the same thing, empowering men to be men, like feel into your masculine, be that responsible human being that you were born into this world to be. But I only know one for men. I know like thousands for women, and there's a reason for that because we are changing that perception that we can be supportive in high school. I think you know what it is when I look at high school. I think we should have been because we both went to girls' schools. It's learning how to be good at what women are good at. You know, like we have intuition. What can we do with our intuition? We are good at creativity. If women were so good in the kitchen, why was it? Well, not everyone, but which ones are? You need to go for that. You need to be empowered to be doing things that we are good for in this world, and to figure out what that is should also be at the school curriculum.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think, I think when it comes to like specific tasks or abilities, there's very so much person to person, regardless of gender. However, there are definitely things about being female that I think, or identifying as female, that I think we should be taught to celebrate rather than suppress. I think we have these like pre-constructed gender roles where we're like, boys are like good at maths and engineering, for example, women are good at like art, and like those might be true in some cases, but like that's also not true across the board. And I think it's about celebrating like, I am female and I am proudly female, but I am also in love with engineering, and like I can do this in my own way as a woman and still be a woman, rather than being strange that I'm a woman doing this, or having to develop uh, or suppress some kind of femininity in order for people to accept me in that career. And vice versa, if I'm a man and I want to be an artist or a chef or do a more creative profession that might traditionally be associated with a feminine role, I am a man and I'm entitled to my masculinity and celebrating that. And like that is in no way should be suppressed because I'm doing XYZ, if that makes sense. And I
Yeah, absolutely.
goes back to your point about being awakened, right? Specifically as a woman, I think once you tap into that sense of femininity and what makes you like in so many wonderful ways female, then you can live your life embracing that and not conforming to constructs around gender roles because you are fully in touch with yourself. And I feel like that's something you very much kind of embody in your own work and kind of what you do. And I wanted to ask you, I think we're speaking about something that I think both of us, when it comes to awakening like the feminine within you, that both of us have done a lot of work to experience and, get to a positive place with. But obviously there are lots of women who might not understand that concept or have had the privilege to do that. And I wanted to ask you what steps you would recommend for women to take to awaken that feminine energy and really embrace it.
Oh, I'm asking this question for my siblings all the time. because because I'm saying this and I cannot say this confidently around a lot of my family members because they'll probably think I'm crazy. Like, what are you talking about? You're waking up to what? Like, you just born into this body, accept who you are and all these things. But that is something that I have never been able to do, is to accept myself until I woke up to the realization that I've been hiding from the fact that I'm a woman, like let's think about this. And for me, it's to the individual who is listening to this or thinking, like, what do they mean by spiritual or feminine awakening? I would say it's actually more about figuring out what you really enjoy, like what you're really good at. And this will help with your business, this will help with your career, this will help with like whatever role you're in as well. It's figuring out what you're good at and how you can celebrate that. I really realized that I was good with marketing. And I was questioning, really, was I on this planet? Was I put on this planet to do marketing? Come on, there's more to life than that. But it was exploring marketing in spaces where I wanted to bring relatable content in. And that was, again, around feminine, soft energy. So look at yourself as a woman or as a feminine person and ask, what is it that you would like to feed yourself more of? What would you like to support your ego in, and allowing it to be in a space that is more compassionate and empathetic? And how can we, as in me, explore that? Does that mean that you need to find people online that's different or sharing that message? Subscribe to someone's newsletter. That was one of the first things I did, was subscribe to someone's newsletter that I had no desire to connect with online. I didn't want to be buying anything from them, nor interacting with them on social media. But following them on their newsletter made me realize, it's like, there's some things that I need to explore within myself. And that's where I started exploring and going deeper and deeper. But I don't think we can honestly say, Annabelle, that there's a step-by-step process to someone that needs to be awakened. It's like saying, like we were talking about on my podcast, the healing only starts when something happens. And it's the same as that you wake up to something when you realize that you were asleep.
Yeah. And it's a journey. I think, you're right, there isn't a step-by-step process. It's a journey to kind of explore and discover and work with yourself and with your tribe, your community. I think community plays a very big role, especially female communities, in discovering that part of yourself, because you're inspired by and motivated by other women, and you can recognize within them things that are a part of you, or you want to mirror.
Join that, actually. Thank you that you said that. Join that space. Don't feel ashamed to explore it. If you feel like, okay, I am not the way that my brother, my sister, my cousin, my father, my friends are. Someone else is, and they're online. And that means that you can connect to them. And this is another reason why I created relatable content, because I felt like I was alone. And then I created it, and then people who felt like they were alone started joining me. And now we're like so many people who are like minded that are saying the same thing. We have similar things in common. So if people are feeling like they need to wake up to something, or they're not sure if they have woken up, dive into the things that we are avoiding, and there you will find some gold.
Absolutely. And I think there are many communities like yours that provide that space. And I think it's wonderful, and I think it's evolving. Like I said, more and more you are changing the face of what community means online. And I think you're right. So often we feel alone in fears, insecurities, uncertainty about ourselves. I mean, we all go through the same things wherever we're from, whatever we, have experienced in life. A lot of it's very similar. And, when you find those spaces, it gives you a sense of security and kind of support, especially from a mental health perspective, I think. And we've spoken quite a bit about kind of various communities, and I've mentioned a few. And I wanted to ask you, along the way on your journey to build this community for women, are there any kind of resources or other channels or communities that have inspired you and are kind of helpful to you in your own life in terms of kind of motivation and also really tapping into that female energy within you?
Yeah, luckily this all started happening before lockdown, and I could name quite a few women who were creating spaces for us to dive into these questions that I've had, but those were offline, and I had a strong desire to learn offline and bring it online, because I found that a lot of people that I was surrounded by were spending time online. And of course, now that we're in lockdown, everything is online. Like, for at least for South Africans, if you want to, maybe for me, I like my home, but online is now the space where you want to advertise, where you want to get people to get a Zoom. So I don't think that those people are doing it yet, purely because they're trying to find themselves online. How can we actually create such a special way of allowing people to tap into their personal selves and emotions? So I don't think that those people have created online, although I can tell you the names. One of them is called Omnioni, and her name is Amy, and she's from South Africa, and I absolutely loved her. I mean, I went to sessions about learning about the masculine and the feminine, but I think, again, they're still deciding what to do with this online space. But there's so many. I just don't think I can answer it based off anyone else's, but the fact that mine has come purely from women's spaces. And I don't want to say that women's spaces are the solution when people want to talk about their mental health, and that is not gender specific at all. So yeah, do you know of any that I've mentioned along the topics of awakening or?
Yeah, I mean, I know, like I said, I know more in like specific areas of like that female awakening. So we actually have a wonderful mutual friend who has a really great space for women, Juliet Littman, who actually introduced us, who has an incredible, incredible space for women to discover, in part sexual awakening, but
Mhm.
how that translates to kind of the rest of your life, and through that sexual awakening really kind of getting in touch with your yoni, with the very female part of yourself, and then translating that into your success in life, and kind of
Yes, a lot of women need.
yeah, hugely so. And then there are other people I mentioned earlier. Grace Hazel
Uh,
is incredible. She does kind of a similar thing, but from a slightly different angle. And also she does a lot offline. So she does have a lovely online community, but her space is very much offline. She runs the most incredible workshops, which, I would say that if you're new to this, it's definitely a way to kind of throw yourself in at the deep end, but it's so worth it. For me, I'm someone that works for. Like if I want to learn something or get into something, I just dive head first. And if that's your approach, then someone like Grace Hazel is probably the right person for you. But if that's not your approach, or you want kind of middle ground, I'd say Juliet is probably your best bet. And there are other people, like I don't know if you've heard of the Goddess Space. I think it's the Goddess Space. She runs these incredible women's circles that are all about yep, so she does them online and offline, and again they're all about embracing that kind of feminine energy, but again these are all kind of women who specialize in like specific spaces rather than a community that brings it all together, if that makes sense.
It wouldn't be that, because we were also discussing that it's hard to find that kind of platform where it's all inclusive. But now that I think I've reflected on the examples that you've given, a lot of them tend to be very sensual and talking about our senses and, embodiment. And there's a lot of embodied coaches. Type in the word embodied on Instagram, or awakening, or sacred and divine, and that's where you can explore. Those words allow you to really feel, and when we feel, we start to wake up and start to realize that we're all living too much in our little beautiful heads and not in our bodies. And like you said, all these central leaders and supporters know how to take us out and bring us in. So yeah, I would definitely recommend all of the ones you just said, because even Grace Hazel, very sexual, for women as well, right?
It's just for women.
Yeah.
Just for women. So it's just about getting in touch with like your very female essence as a woman, and her practices are sexual to some extent, or sensual rather, but in a way that's all about getting in touch with like your power as a woman.
I think any woman in relatable content can give you some of that.
Yeah.
Even though the podcasts that I've done, every single podcast that I've done, besides one with a beautiful man named Josh, is about females and owning our sensuality and communication and learning to grow from our intuition. So yeah, I'll start there as well.
Absolutely. And then I think it's also, going beyond that, back to the point about finding spaces that also celebrate women. And you're a great example of that. But there are like a few others if you just want kind of like daily bites of inspiration. Like Girls Are Awesome is a great one. Or Feminist is one of my favorites. They're not so much like, they don't provide, I guess, education in the same way that your platform does, but it's just like great quotes, like great facts, great things that like remind us what it is to be female and why that's fantastic. So I would highly recommend those as well.
Yeah, I've written them down. I'm going to check them out right after them.
Thank you so much for being with me here today. It's been such a pleasure to have you. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.